Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Matt Bertucci. I'm an associate professor in horticulture at the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. This is our first in a series of webinars for the 2026 Compost Awareness Week. Today we'll be hearing about Compost 101 from Colin Massey. He's the horticulture extension agent in Washington County. And we'll also be hearing about municipal composting and different municipal food waste compost programs from Faebyan Shields, who is a environmental educator with the City of Fayetteville. So the two of them have a lot of really good information that I hope you'll enjoy, and I hope you can also join us for all of the other Compost Awareness Week events we have going on this week. Thank you.
So this is Composting 101. Thank you all for joining. What we're really talking about, I only have about 30 minutes, so we're going to kind of fly through this. I've shortened it a bit from sometimes this is a more expanded 1 hour talk. But what we're really talking about here is home composting. We'll go through just the basics, the benefits of compost, connecting that to garden productivity, and we'll go through some, troubleshooting, some common issues that you might encounter. And then I think Faebyan will have a nice contrast with municipal composting. So first, we like to frame this as kind of looking at, this is municipal solid waste that was generated. This study was done in 2018. I think the previous one to that was 2012. It's from the US EPA. But the two I kind of want you to focus on are in the bottom left, where we have food waste, which actually went up from 2012, which is sad, and yard trimmings. And that's making up like 32% of the things that go into the landfill. That's taking up space that really doesn't need to be in the landfill. And so when we're talking about composting, it's really redirecting that and turning that into a resource, right? So what is composting is a natural process. It's decomposition and recycling organic matter back into a humus-rich soil amendment known as compost. And we know this happens in nature, right? One fun way to think about it is if anyone likes to go hiking, if composting didn't happen, we would be up to our ears in leaves when we're hiking through the woods. So this is a natural process. When we do this at home, we're kind of accelerating it, right? We're kind of hijacking the system and making it happen faster than it would in nature. But simply stated, it's nature's way of recycling pretty much anything that used to be alive. One thing I want to differentiate is that compost isn't soil. I often hear, just colloquially speaking, people say, I'm making soil. Well, not quite. You're making organic matter, and it's a component of soil, but soil actually really contains mineral particles. It's made up of 3 different textures of sand, silt, and clay. There's also space for water, space for air, and then a pretty small fraction of that, here they're showing about 5%, is made up of organic matter. About 80% of that humus, or kind of an active fraction. There's microorganisms, and of course there is roots. But I like to refer to it as a soil amendment, an additive, right? And really when we're talking about organic matter in the context of soil, organic matter is really like the glue that binds soil particles together into what we call aggregates. So if you go out with a trowel or a shovel and you dig in some good native soil, it kind of has these clods that stick together. And that's due to organic matter being that glue that holds it together. So when we look specifically at organic matter, just like the previous pie chart, we see about 10% of it is fresh residue, has yet to be broken down. We have the active fraction that could make up almost 50% of that, that's actively being decomposed. We have stabilized organic matter, also known as humus, that can be 50% of that. And then there's those microbes that are really doing all the work of decomposition and breaking that down and eventually allowing for those nutrients to be released and be taken up by plants. But generally speaking, compost or organic matter additions are going to improve properties for any soil texture, whether that's sandy, silty, or clay. So just kind of some snapshots of what it improves. It's going to help improve your soil structure, just like I mentioned, being the glue that really binds those particles together. There's little micropores and macropores all throughout that. It helps improve soil texture. Like it's really one of the only ways that we can try to remedy heavy clay is by adding organic matter. It's going to improve aeration. Roots need oxygen. Those microbes need oxygen. We need good gas atmospheric exchange between the soil and the air. It's also going to help increase water holding capacity, infiltration. It's going to help promote soil fertility. It may be used to help with erosion control once that's been incorporated and kind of stabilized. It will promote healthy root development. Earthworms will show up when it's present. And you're also really getting a very active biology. Mostly, we'll talk about those mostly beneficial microorganisms in just a moment. So it can be free if you're doing it at home. Sometimes cities will give it away if they have a surplus, but it's usually pretty inexpensive to get a bulk load, and Fabian's going to talk about that. But it's also a great way to divert that waste and recycle those nutrients to be available to plants. It can be a fun and very educational activity for kids and adults alike, and it's a great way to improve your garden productivity. And this is the basic process right here. We have our organic material. We have four parts of this. We have to have air, we have to have moisture or water, and we have to have those microorganisms. And when those work together in balance across time, the heat's going to increase and it will break down into this garden amendment we call compost. Let's also differentiate it briefly from mulch. Again, compost that's organic residues that have been broken down, they've been piled, moistened, allowed to undergo aerobic biological decomposition. And by aerobic, we mean oxygen is present. Mulch is a material we spread over the surface to help conserve moisture, prevent weed growth. But one thing to keep in mind is over time, that will also break down and turn into organic matter. It's just going to take longer because we're not really manipulating that. Okay, and I can't really see my title slide here, but these are the basic things that we can use at home to build a compost pile. So we have the greens and we have the browns. And when we talk about the greens, what we're really talking about is things that contain nitrogen. The main nutrients we're focusing on here as far as the process is nitrogen and carbon. And the browns represent carbon heavy materials. So we have things like fall leaves, which I have an abundance of fine woody materials, straw, even paper, maybe not the glossy mailers that you get, but newspaper is great. And on the green side, that nitrogen side would be things like plant clippings, sometimes manures. We'll talk about some precautions with that. Our fruit and vegetable peelings that we're cooking with instead of going into the trash, that can be set aside and added to the compost. Coffee grounds. Eggshells are on here. I don't use them anymore. I don't find that they break down very well. If you are going to use them, I suggest maybe drying them and pulverizing them into a powder if you're looking to get more calcium. If you know someone that's a barber or a hairdresser, hair is actually very high in nitrogen. I think it's about a 3-to-1 ratio of nitrogen to carbon. So let's look at those ratios and what they mean. On the top, we have the browns. Again, those like woody materials. And this is, sorry, I got that backwards earlier. The first number, it represents carbon. After the colon represents nitrogen. So that's a carbon to nitrogen ratio. So something like arborist wood chips would have a 700 parts carbon for every 1 part nitrogen, whereas leaves would have 60 parts carbon for 1 part nitrogen. Something like hair would be 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And what we're trying to do is find a balance, ideally around 30-to-1, 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And so if we take something like leaves and our coffee grounds, maybe some vegetable peelings, we can find that balance. And the reason being is that's where that decomposition process operates most efficiently. The microbes have plenty of nitrogen to fuel their metabolism and feed them energy while they break down those carbon materials. So that graph that you see, you see a spike in temperature. There's temperature on the y-axis, the vertical axis, and days of decomposition on the x-axis. And when we hit that sweet spot of 30 to 1, we get up to that temperature over maybe 3 to 5 days that's most efficient for not only decomposing that material, but also possibly denaturing or killing weed seeds and pathogens. Now, in a home compost pile, it might be difficult to get this because it's going to depend on volume and how much space that you have. But Faebyan will probably talk about this with something like a municipal compost facility. They are easily reaching this and they're monitoring it all the time to ensure that it does get to that temperature that can kill those weed seeds and pathogens. This is just a quick look at some of our microorganism friends that are doing all this wonderful work for us. Most of them being microscopic, but you can see kind of on the fringe, there are some macrofauna here. Things like earwigs. They do not crawl into your ear. They do some great work with composting. That's a myth. Black fly larvae, earthworms, obviously, centipedes, sow bugs. So a lot of these macrofauna are really just chewers. They're going in and making that material smaller, increasing the surface area, and making it easier for those microorganisms like fungi and beneficial bacteria to get into those small crevices. Some of them are predatory, they're eating each other, but some of them are actually eating that material and breaking it down even further. And I mentioned composting at home can be a really fun activity for youth. I think it's fun, and I would say if you are planning on starting a compost pile at home or you already have one, go out at night with a flashlight, dig around a little bit or just look on the surface, and it will be just teeming with cool insects that are working while we sleep to give us this soil amendment. There's some more. I think that used to be a video. All those sow bugs crawling around there. It's quite fun. And if you dig back into that pile, you'll see a few other things inside there too. So how long does it take? Well, it depends. If we're actively managing it, and by that means we're kind of monitoring the moisture and we're going out and actually turning that material every several days, it could happen at home in a matter of months. I'm a bit of a lazy composter. I just go into it with a realistic expectation that at the end of the year, I'm going to go top dress my garden with what I made. So I usually am fine to wait over a year, and when I've done my garden sanitation and cleaned out all the old plants, I will top dress this and maybe work it in. But you can certainly accelerate the process by actively managing it with turning it often and making sure it has adequate moisture. Also, the type of material can determine how long this will take. The larger the material you put in there, the longer it's going to take to break down. So if you're trying to get something faster, you might invest in something like a leaf shredder or a wood chipper to get those particles even smaller. And then location matters. Shade versus sun, I like a little mix of both. Obviously in full sun, it could dry out faster. If it's in too dense of shade, it may stay too moist. So getting kind of that balance of maybe 4 to 6 hours has kind of been ideal for me. And then again, trying to make sure that ratio is that carbon to nitrogen ratio is close to that 30 to 1. But if it's not, it's fine. Composting is still going to happen. It just may take a little bit longer, but it's a natural process. It's going to proceed with or without you. A lot of different ways to build a compost pile. The top left, they've used an old, looks like dog kennel just to kind of contain that pile a little bit, maybe keep some critters out. Top middle, they have just made a large pile and it looks fantastic. You see they've cleared some away and they definitely have some black gold in there, and they've got a nice cover on it with those fall leaves. There are bins that you can purchase. There are bins that you could build out of an old trash can, as seen in the bottom right. The middle picture in the bottom, I'm not really proud of. That was my first attempt at making a compost bin out of pallets. And kind of like a raised bed, you got to be realistic. Material is going to break down over time. You might have to rebuild it. So even just a pile is fine if you don't want to mess with that. But on the bottom left, they have a really nice 3 bin system, one that they're actively adding to, one that they've stopped adding things to, but they're still turning it. And on the far right, a finished compost that they can go apply to the garden. Just some photos of what I graduated to after my pallet compost bins. I was gifted a tumbler, and it lasted me about 6 years. It died last fall. It finally caved in. But then I took an old yard waste bin, drilled some holes in it, and that was kind of where I stored it until I was ready to use it. So pros and cons to all of this. I did find it a little bit challenging to get the compost out when it was ready. So sometimes I would just kind of roll it over a tarp, kind of shake it out, and then drag that tarp over to the garden. Um, Again, for what I was doing, it was enough to top dress my small little side garden. Maybe I had a little bit left for the raised bed as well, but it should come out looking dark. A little bit of moisture to it, not as much where you squeezed it that water would come out, and it really shouldn't have much of an odor. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute with troubleshooting. So select a bin to fit your needs. Again, those small particles compost faster. I would recommend if you are putting food scraps out, you might want to incorporate those versus what you see in the bottom right of leaving them on top. It could attract some scavengers that maybe you don't want around, like possum or skunks. We've got to get our greens and browns balanced. And something that's very important is, especially if you're using a bin like I was, is that you need to inoculate it. You need to add that bacteria, those microorganisms. And a really easy way to do that is when say you've got some leaves in there, you've got some kitchen scraps, it would be just to take about a shovelful of native soil or topsoil and toss that in there. That's your inoculant because those microorganisms already exist in the soil. They will find themselves in a very hospitable environment. They will start to reproduce and multiply. You can buy inoculants of microorganisms as well, but that's free and it works. So again, select a good location. Already mentioned about sun and shade. Turning and mixing will accelerate the process. That's what you're really doing is introducing oxygen into the system. Those organisms will use up oxygen, so you're really replenishing that by turning it and mixing it. And again, that finished compost should appear like it does in those photos, dark brown, sometimes black, crumbly, little to no aroma. So, a couple troubleshooting things. Things I wouldn't put in a home compost pile. This doesn't apply to a municipal system that gets much hotter, but at home, if I know that I'm probably not going to be getting to that 140, 160 degree temperature range, I'm not going to put raw meat or cooked meat or bones in there, poultry, fish, things that are very oily, fatty foods. Whole eggs, I accidentally made that mistake once, and it was not pleasant when I was turning it and that cracked. It smelled very bad. Dairy products, pet waste for me is a no-go at home. Our pets have very protein-rich diets, and there's a lot of E. coli and things that I wouldn't really want to be going near vegetables that I'm working around or possibly consuming. Treated wood's not as big of an issue anymore. The laws have changed on that. Treated wood used to be treated with arsenic. It could leach into soil, but now those are typically copper-based, which is used as an organic fungicide. I mentioned, don't dump and run. If you are putting things in there, I would try to incorporate them. But again, things like meat could attract flies and also other pests. If you're getting kind of a rotten odor, often it will be somewhat like a sulfur odor, and you didn't put a whole egg in there. It's often due to excessive moisture. It's kind of gone anaerobic, and there's not as much oxygen movement. And a way to remedy that would be to turn it, add some more of that brown material like leaves to absorb some of that, and just hold off and maybe reduce the amount of water that you're introducing. If you're getting an ammonia odor, that means you probably have too much nitrogen, too many greens relative to your brown material. So a simple way, again, to remedy that would be to add more brown and try to balance that out. Now, often at home, I mentioned we may not have enough space to create a large enough pile to get up to that 140, 160 heat range. Pretty common. Um, but again, it's just going to mean that your process is going to take a little bit longer. It's still going to compost. But one way that we can um, improve that is by frequently, every several days, turning that pile and mixing it and incorporating that moisture and that oxygen. Um, again, I can't see my title slide because of the band there. I'm not sure what this says. When not to use compost, it's not so much when, but I know why I have this here. When planting trees, this is a little bit of an aside, we might be tempted to fill that planting hole with this wonderful, rich compost. And that is actually not recommended according to the research because we kind of create a pot in the soil. It can hold moisture really well, and often the roots find themselves very happy in there and don't want to move out into the native soil. So if you just have to have some compost where you're planting new trees, I'd keep it to about 20% or less, well mixed in with that native soil. Um, Fabian will probably talk about this, and I'm running out of time, so I'll probably skip it. But any places that you're purchasing compost are probably, hopefully they're paying attention to quality. I know City of Fayetteville has done a very good job of this, where you can go look at lab results, kind of get an idea of the nutrients, and make sure that it's a good quality product. I'd also encourage you to check out our University of Arkansas Extension website. We have a lot of resources on composting, on the process. Also building different types of bins, worm composting, which we're not talking about today, how to build a worm compost bin, but some really good resources. This is the landing page for that. All those fact sheets that I showed will be on this landing page, kind of down towards the bottom. And I think am within time. I think that is it for me. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Colin. That was awesome as always. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. Happy Compost Awareness Week. City of Fayetteville is super excited to be invited again to talk about what we do here in the city, and just share with some folks some ways that they can participate in the action of composting. So let me get my button on changing the slide. Okay. All right. There it goes. So first thing we'll talk about is what is food waste. Most folks probably already know. We think of vegetables, fruits, the eggshell that must be processed some more before it goes into backyard compost. Now, of course, our coffee grounds. But people start to kind of drift away from putting things in the compost once you start looking at processed foods, cooked meats, pastas. Those are the things you don't want to put in your backyard. Bones, those bioplastics that we're seeing, from our favorite coffee shops or even from, the bars we might visit that have those compostable cups. That is kind of the overview of what food waste can be considered. And in Fayetteville, we have about 20% of our food waste, of our waste stream is food. Did it reverse? 20% of the waste in Fayetteville is compostable. As you see this picture here on the screen, that is actually one of the cafeterias here in the Fayetteville School District. Little snapshot of what was getting thrown away as they started to move into collecting food waste from all the schools. We did a waste audit as well in 2024. And we found, we'll be doing another one this year. We found that most of the food waste is coming from commercial sources, but we have a lot that we're missing from the multifamily units or residential side of the coin. And so we are, as a city, excited to participate in figuring out where food waste can go instead of where it goes right now. Most of y'all probably also already know that we all share a landfill in Tawnytown. It is one of those beautiful places that folks don't really think about, and a lot of people live there and do not want to see an expansion with the landfill. So, in being mindful of our neighbors and showing up as the best city we can, we are working, to try to keep all the food waste we can the landfill. And one of the ways we do that is through education and just sharing some of the things about food waste. There is a really cool EPA wasted food scale that some of y'all might have also already seen, and it helps people kind of work the, the system to get to the least amount of food waste from your own daily life choices. The first one that everybody probably could use help with, including myself, is only purchasing what you need. Going to the grocery store when you're hungry, usually you end up with things that you wouldn't have usually bought or things that are not going to be super nutritious. So making sure that you go buy groceries at times when you're not starving is one of those just little small tricks in purchasing only what you need. The other thing that most folks don't know about is donating food. A lot of events are happening in Northwest Arkansas, and anybody can make plans to donate the leftover food from their event, whether it's a small event or larger scale. You can contact organizations in the area and ask them if they could accept a food waste donate, or sorry, excuse me, food donation. Food waste, I've said the wrong way. A food donation, so we don't even want it to get to the waste stage. And you can have those conversations ahead of time, make plans for dropping off the extra food, making sure it stays food safe during the whole event. So anything that's supposed to be cold stays cold, anything that's supposed to be hot stays hot. And that can be donated to organizations that are helping folks with food insecurity. I don't know, many people may already know this, but we rank #1 in food insecurity, which is definitely a call to action. There was a survey that was done recently, the Arkansas Health Security Survey. 1 in 5 Americans are going hungry. 25% of those experiencing food insecurity are children. And then there are some communities in Arkansas in which 35% of the community has no idea where their next meal is coming from. So things like this, where we know we have surplus food or we do have extra in our budget to donate to the local food bank, is definitely one of those like top tier choices to help our neighbors. The next thing you'll see is feed the animals or leave unharvested. That is actually the step before composting. So before you even think about sending it to our facility so that we can make it into a nutrient-rich compost, you're checking in with like, can it be fed to animals? Is it something that puppers can eat? Not everything can go to our dogs, but a lot of people do feed them the plate scraps. Or do you have a farmer friend that can take on some of your food waste? There's a lot of those agreements in town actually where restaurants work with local farmers to make sure that food waste ends up to with them instead of in Town at the landfill. And then of course you've got the last two, which are not preferred. You've got anaerobic digestion, and you've also got sending it down the drain, sending it to landfill or incineration. All of those things create weight on the water system. So, the water treatment plants are having to deal with food waste. So sending it down the drain is one of those things that they would prefer not be done. So scrape your plates in your compost bin. The other option, landfilling creates a lot of methane waste and also kind of messes with our food cycle that we've got going on here in Northwest Arkansas. A lot of farmers buy the compost that's created in the city of Fayetteville, and they are able to create this really strong food system. And so instead of that dead stop linear plan where you buy the food, eat the food, throw the food away, goes to the landfill, never to be seen again because nothing decomposes in the landfill. It is an anaerobic environment. They have found heads of lettuce that are 10 years old, newspapers from the 1930s. So the whole point of sending things to the landfill is not to make it go away for forever. It just gets encapsulated where we no longer have access to it in the food system. So the last thing we see, incinerate. That's also one of those options that is not preferred because while it can be used for waste to energy, taking it out of the food system is more detrimental in the long term. So in the city of Fayetteville, we had started out with a mobile food waste trailer. That was before my time. but this fun picture was taken of me, so I thought I'd use it. But this was our first movement into educating our public back before the pandemic that food waste could be kept out of the landfill. And so we started a drop-off program that we hosted at the farmers market. So starting in 2016, they started handing out collection buckets that we got from a USDA grant to give out to our community to fill it with their food scraps, bring it to our drop-offs, rinse out their bucket at home, and then do it again. So we have also researched a little bit recently and noticed that, not only are we the only state or the only city in the state of Arkansas that's a municipality that runs a food waste composting program, but there's only about 400 cities in America that are set up to divert food waste. Several private entities do exist, but actually having something municipality run is definitely different and not the mainstream. So it's pretty cool that Arkansas and our city has something accessible here in the northwest of the state. Oh, and another cool fact I learned was that less than a dozen states have regulations prohibiting food waste from being landfilled. So that's one of those things that I think some folks will have to start thinking about is, we should be able to make great decisions with our waste and not have to, have regulations around it. But as landfills fill up and we need more conscious decisions about our food system, then there might be regulations that come along the way down the way. So this is our collection buckets. That's kind of interesting. And then we have our drop-offs that I talked about. So we started out with just our recycling center drop-offs, and then we had community partners come along. We have Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, Trinity United Methodist, and then we also added some more drop-offs this year and last year. So we have the Ozark Smokehouse is the most recent addition. They're on the west side of town, along with Bryce Davis Park. So if you are coming in from Farmington or Prairie Grove, you can drop off your food waste at the food waste container because it's accessible to anybody who wants to use it, not just for folks that live here in Fayetteville. And then we also have a list here just over, viewing what is compostable in Fayetteville. You'll have to give me a moment. I'm not trying to rush through too fast, but I want to give time for questions. So take a breath and drink.
Yes, everyone,
Of
don't
water.
forget you can hit the Q&A if you have a question. All the other things are shut down, but Q&A works.
Yes, please ask your questions if you have any. So one of the cool things about compost programs that are municipality run in a larger commercial scale versus your backyard are that we can accept a lot of different materials that you wouldn't want to put in the backyard. We talked about temperature and moisture control along with microbes, and that is something on our scale. We're very grateful to be able to do something like you do in the backyard, but much larger. So at our facility, we're able to take in all of the certified compostable containers and bags. I put one company on here, BPI. They're one of the mainstream brands you see that, certifies that something does actually break down as a compostable component in compost and does not actually just biodegrade into like a microplastic. So it is very specific to composting. We also take processed foods, cooked meats. We do not take raw meats in this program. Some programs across America do. At this point, we are just doing the cooked meats. We can take food soil paper products. A big ticker for the paper products is making sure that it does come from a reputable source, even if it's not third-party certified. You don't want to have any of the PFAS on there, the chemicals that can stay around for a while and actually create some issues with human health. So we want to try to keep those out of our compost. It's kind of tricky to know how, what's going to have this product on it or not. But a lot of paper products that are labeled as greasy or that they are resistant to grease often have those chemicals. They're treated with those chemicals. So just try to avoid, anything that has maybe those little qualifications to it. We also
Fabian,
have, yes,
I was just going to interrupt. I saw a question I thought you might want to answer just before you.
yes.
Someone said,
Absolutely.
why can you not compost biodegradable materials?
Biodegradable material. Yes, so that is one of those crazy kind of it's a greenwash scene where when we used to use the word biodegradable and that meant it went back to the earth and we didn't really have to worry about anything. But what we really find is that biodegradable does not actually indicate that it's compostable. Biodegradable just means that the exterior elements, the sun, the weather, the moisture content broke down whatever material that wasn't actually an organic material into smaller parts where you can no longer see them. So it biodegrades into not its one, component anymore. It is into several of the same components. So it actually didn't get broken down molecularly to become a nutrient portion of the soil. It is still the same piece of plastic bag. We see this a lot with plastic bags, actually. We see biodegradable and plastic under the sun, UV is very strong. It will biodegrade anything. It'll take care of a kayak if you leave it out long enough. It will biodegrade any plastic, but the plastic still remains plastic. It does not actually become a component of the soil that can be uptaken by plants. So hopefully that answers the question because that's a great one. Biodegradability is different than compostability. So yes, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then, of course, we've got the eggs and eggshells that we mentioned earlier. They do not break down very well in the backyard. So we do take them to at our facility and they break down completely. We have large machinery, row turners that aerate and kind of break down some of the things inside. And of course, we have a big grinder that sifts out any extra materials. But the eggs and eggshells are broken down, and you don't have to worry about any gross egg smells in our compost because everything gets capped off, which we'll talk about that a little bit here soon. And then a big thing with the coffee grounds and teas, we want to note that it's non-synthetic filters. So some of my favorite teas out there, I found out actually do not have a compostable filter. It is synthetic. It is plastic, petroleum plastic based, and doesn't actually compost. So kind of watch your teas and the favorite ones that you have, because some of them might be compostable, some of them might not. The interior is going to be compostable. So if that's something you want to do is rip out the insides of the tea bag and then, go ahead and throw away the remaining portion of that filter if it's not, a compostable version. But that's one of the things we're starting to notice too, is that we don't want those to end up in the compost system. We fruits and veggies, baked goods, dairy. So you've got, cheeses, yogurts, even milk. So we can take liquid things as well. We don't ever have to worry about moisture, that's for sure around here. But that just kind of, helps with some of that in our compost program. And then this year, we went live with a curbside collection for food waste. This is expanded to residents, not only in single family homes, but also in multifamily residents. Just depending on where the location is, there's a good chance it's serviceable. And we're trying to figure out a plan for multi-level residences as well. So we're really excited that Ozark Compost is our service provider for that. I've got a QR code on there real quick so that folks can scan that if they want to get more information from the website. It is a really cool program attached to the utility billing. So every month when you get your water bill, it's just on there too. And you get the bucket swap. So one of the things that was feedback from the folks that use our drop-off program is that washing the bucket out is an extra burden sometimes, or trying to find the time to route it to the drop off because our lives are full. It's just one of those things that people really want to do, but how does it work for their life? So this is an option for folks to have, a very reasonable fee, low as we can get it right now. So it's $15.90 a month for 2 pickups, so every other week. And then they give you that clean bucket, so you never have to worry about, dropping off the bucket or cleaning it out afterwards. So we're really excited about that. So far, we've had about 500 people sign up for the program, and it's just going really, really well. So if anybody had any questions about that too, please let me know. So at our facility, we use modified static aerobic processing. And that just means it's a big backyard pile. The rows are about 200 feet long. So it's like what you do, only on a larger scale. And we're able to control temperature. We have temperature probes on our active piles that make sure we hit at least 131 degrees. That starts to kill all the pathogens. And then we get the weeds, seeds also killed. And then, of course, it can get up to be pretty warm, but we don't want it to go past 160, or even, 155, because we're wanting to keep all of those beneficial microbes in the soil system. And once it starts getting a little too hot, some of those fellows start to disappear, and we don't want it to get that warm. But it does get to temperature. It is third-party certified for all the components of it, for pathogens, so people can trust that what they're purchasing from our facility, the finished product, is going to be safe to grow food, not only in your garden, but as I said earlier, a lot of farmers that you buy from the farmers market or even your local co-ops actually use this compost to grow the next season of food. So as we talked earlier about the linear system, we are now in a circular system where you buy the food, you eat the food, put the food into the compost down, a farmer buys that compost, grows your favorite food again, you buy it from the farmer's market. So it creates this continual loop, which is what we're trying to go for in the city. This next slide is really cool. It shows, okay, so in this one you can see our what looks like a landfill trash truck collects all of our commercial and drop-offs for our food waste program. And then you'll see in that lower left corner, that's the row turner. And on this next one, you'll see a little bit better visual of the row turner there. It is quite large. I didn't get a picture of the screener. That's something I need to. But you'll notice on here, the way we do our piles is it's kind of opposite. We actually have it to where the outside heats up first and then creates a chimney effect. And so we're able to compost pretty quickly, within about that third month, we have a finished product. It is still pretty green and still needs to kind of set for a little bit, but that's how we're able to roll through that compost to get it out to our community faster. We also add an inoculant. So we have a layer of mulch, a layer of food waste, inoculant, some yard waste, and a cap of mulch to keep all of the smells down. And that sits there and cooks for a little bit before the row turner comes in and aerates it. So the oxygen can continue to help the microbes do their thing. But we're really excited that we're able to provide this to our community, even through such a simple method. So this year, we had this great poster, Compost, feed the soil that feeds us. And I hope that y'all have been inspired, if you aren't already composting your food, that you'll try, or perhaps maybe you'll encourage somebody else to compost their food, because you can see all the benefits that it can reach the community. So you can ask yourself, what's your green action for this week? Here we go. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Fabian. I had a question. I didn't see any in the chat just yet. If people
Yeah.
type them in, they're welcome. I guess remind me, so the pickup, do you think the city's like approaching their capacity for the pickup, or would they be excited to get more members? Like, what's the balance? Like, are you like, we had 500 slots and 500 are filled, or we have 500
Oh,
and we would
yeah.
love 1,500?
We are, yes, thank you for that question. We would love to see another 500. So we have a goal of 1,000 this year. So
Okay.
we're about halfway there. So we definitely have the capacity for growth. And we will be expanding our compost side as well, because one of the things, as you noticed earlier, that commercial is where we are losing a lot of the food waste. And so being able to service those higher volume businesses is a big goal of ours, and expanding our facility to be able to capture all those materials is really important.
Very cool. Yeah, because I have not signed up for it yet, but it's mostly that I'm able to retain
Yeah,
most of my stuff and compost at home. But
yes,
the city does pick up. Like there are times where I'm too heavy in brown matter, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna put it by the curb, and the city takes that. But
yes.
um, and now I've got chickens, so I actually have a lot of food scraps get reconsumed. But I appreciate knowing that because I do think obviously the same. I think I've told you in personal conversations, like when I had all my crawfish shells, I was like, this is gonna be a lot for my compost pile. Like I'm just gonna take.
Let it come down. Yes. And that's a
Uh,
great example, actually. If you have a larger party and you want, some support, we can actually bring food waste carts that are smaller version. We actually have a lot of POAs reach out for, parties during the summer that they're having. And they want to make sure that all their hot dogs are grilling, all their food waste is, ending up where it's not being thrown away. So we actually provide a lot of services to help the small and big folks with their events. Like, so if you have a crawfish boil and you want to have a compost cart, we could drop one off and then we can come pick it up. Yeah. So it's different than our like commercial program. It's like specific to events and residents. But it's just kind of, something we also offer.
well, yeah, and
And
I
it's
think
free of
when
charge. Yeah.
when Colin was saying that eggshells don't break down that thoroughly in piles, that's true. They kind of hang around a little bit. And it's like, I feel like I've never even tried, but I feel like crawfish tails and heads would just be a little
You might have
stubborn.
a little bit of a horror scene, a little bit. Yeah. Just like popping out there every once in a while. I agree with you. Yeah, I don't know
But
that. Yeah.
the only other question I'd have, I didn't see another one through the chat, and that's okay. But I was going to follow up because tomorrow we're going to hear from people at the Fayetteville Public School, Fayetteville High School, which I know has done, a pilot program for composting, and they interact with the city. Are you
Mhm.
aware, like, did they approach the city, or like, do you know,
Oh
or
my gosh, this is such a lovely story, and I will not tell it as well as the other environmental educator. But we had some amazing students at Fayetteville High a couple of years ago get curious about why they weren't composting the food waste, and they found out that the schools had been composting prior to the pandemic, and were curious how they could get started back on that again. And they did a full presentation to their school board and
oh
won them
wow.
over to start that process again. And the other educator has been working with all of the schools to get them transitioned back to the food waste program. And the model is so cool. They're actually having the high school students mentor the elementary school folks to help them know what to do and how to divert the food waste properly and make sure there's no milk cartons in there or the Ziploc bags. And then we've actually got some college folks involved as well from the university that are mentoring some of the students at Fayetteville High. So again, creating this circular system so everybody is kind of working together because none of this happens on its own.
Well,
It
and I've
takes a
heard that
community,
too,
and
that I
it
mean, and
is.
we're like, that behaviors can be much harder to change. Like when you just learn, like, this is trash, you just throw food in the trash,
Yeah,
trash, trash, trash. That's just imprinted in your mind. But, when you start to think about it, like, why is that trash? Why isn't that being something else? And then on the flip side, if you just learn this is composted, this is composted, this is composted, that's just, it doesn't even feel like a chore or an added activity. It's just, this is how you handle this type of, material. As if this gets composted, that goes.
exactly. It normalizes something we did a couple of generations ago that, at the mass scale and just how fast our lives move, we went away from, but people are starting to acknowledge that the system doesn't quite work in this format. We cannot continue to fill up landfills without some sort of recourse. And there will be, issues in the future that we will have to address with where we're going to send our waste. And if we are able to send just the waste that we know we can't do anything with, stuff that's, not compostable, not recyclable, then we'll know that we're not only doing the best thing for our neighboring landfills, wherever that ends up, because these are in places where people live, but we're also making sure we're paying the lowest amount of charges because we will have to truck this stuff out.
Mhm.
Emissions are a thing. So there's a bigger picture of questions that, if we figure out all the answers to what we're sending to landfill now, we'll be able to answer a lot easier when that time comes.
Well, we really, I mean, I do appreciate you taking time sharing the city side of it and highlighting the unique, like that we're,
Thank you.
a minority at this time of municipalities. That's a very cool thing to
Yeah,
be proud of and
it
excited
really
about.
is. It really
Being
is.
able to
And
hear.
I answered the question in the Q&A, but Harvest Quest are the folks that we get our inoculant from. So it's mixture of bacteria and yeast, and there's a bunch of them, and they like to party. So they do their work fast, and we don't have to do as much. So yes, you can look up Harvest Quest. That's what
Oh,
the
thank
company
you.
is.
Okay, thanks,
Yeah.
Fabian. I didn't see that. Apologies.
I think it
But
just popped up. I just saw it too.
so that's my
But thank
ulterior
you.
motive too about asking about those students is to remind everyone that tomorrow, either take a late lunch or we will record it. Don't sweat it. But I am going to try and showcase the students at Fayetteville High who kind of led with this. I have one of their
Yeah.
instructors, and then I work with Lance Grigsby at the Arkansas Student Union on campus and a
Yeah.
couple undergrads. So we're going to hear from them and have a discussion. So we're really excited about that. If you're interested, please join. So with that, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Fabian. Thank you, Colin. And I'll get this up on YouTube, y'all.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.